makan soalnya nggak
Oh iya iya. Lu mau gua kirimin aja gitu?
Enggak, ada yang previous punya.
Oh ya boleh deh. Sama aja sih. Iya. Cuma tanggalnya aja beda.
Iya. Enggak, itu mau pakai tanggal kita.
Oh gitu deh.
Iya.
Oke. So besides Zoom and YouTube channel that we have here today, Bante also has his own YouTube channel called Student of the Path. And if you guys want to check his talk and speech on that channel, you're very much welcome. Student of the Path.
Or if you just put Bhikkhu Jayasara, you'll find everything. If you Google Bhikkhu Jayasara, you can
Yeah.
see everything that I do.
Alright, ready ini dengan slide-nya Andi? So Bante, at the end, we're gonna have that blessing again. So it's up to you. You want to use the Patidana that we're gonna have on the screen, or you can have you on.
Actually, I'll use this.
Oh, okay,
I have the-
awesome.
Yeah.
So, alright, this is in Indonesian. Sorry. Tata cara puja bakti kita hari ini, mohon Bapak Ibu dapat duduk dengan tegak di tempat yang layak dan bila memungkinkan di depan altar, dan berpakaian rapi dan sopan. Dimohon tidak menyalakan TV atau handphone dan tidak sambil makan, dan untuk tetap menjaga ketenangan dan perhatian penuh selama kebaktian dilaksanakan. Baik, marilah kita mulai puja bakti pada pagi hari ini dengan membacakan nama Karapata. We're gonna start this service this morning with nama Karapata. Arahang sama sambuddho bhagawa Buddhang bhagawantang abhiwademi. Sang Bhagawa yang maha suci, yang telah mencapai penerangan sempurna, aku bersujud di hadapan Sang Buddha, Sang Bhagawa. Swakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami. Dhamma telah sempurna dibabarkan oleh Sang Bhagawa. Aku bersujud di hadapan Dhamma. Supatipano Bhagavato Sawaka Sangho Sanghang namami. Sangha siswa Sang Bhagawa telah bertindak sempurna. Aku bersujud di hadapan Sangha. So before we start with Vandana, let's we give Bante 3 bows as a respect to the Sangha. Okasa Vandami Bante. Let us recite Pancasila Aradhana Parita. Okasa ahang bante tisaranena sating Pancasila dhammang yacami. Anugahang katwa silang detame bante. Dutiyampi okasa ahang bante tisaranena sating Pancasila dhammang yacami. Anugahang katwa silang detame bante. Tatiyampi okasa ahang bante Tisaranena satjing Pancasila damang yacami Anugahang katwa silang detame bante
Yamahang vadami tamvedeta.
Amma bante
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa
Buddhang saranang gacchami.
Buddhang saranang gacchami
Dhammang saranang gacchami.
Dhammang saranang gacchami
Sanghang saranang gacchami.
Sanghang saranang gacchami
Dutiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi Buddhang saranang gacchami
Dutiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi Dhammang saranang gacchami
Dutiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi Sanghang saranang gacchami
Tatiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi Buddhang saranang gacchami
Tatiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi Dhammang saranang gacchami
Tatiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi Sanghang saranang gacchami
Tisaranaгаmanang sampurnam.
Amma bante
Panatipata veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Panatipata Veramani Sikkhapadang Sammadhiyami
Adinadana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Adinadana Veramani Sikkhapadang Sammadhiyami
Kamesu miccachara veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Kamesu Miccachara Veramani Sikkhapadang Sammadhiyami
Musavada veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Musawada Veramani Sikkhapadang Sammadhiyami
Sura Media Majjapamadattana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Surameraya Majjapamadattana Veramani Sikkhapadang Sammadhiyami
Tisaranena saddhing panchasilang dhammang samadhiyatva sadhukang surakitang katva appamadena sampadetta bang. Silena sugating yanti, silena bhoga sampada, silena nibbuting yanti, tasma silang visode.
Amma bante Satu Satu Satu. And now we're gonna recite together the Dhamma Desana Aradhana Parita. Brahmacaloka Dipati Sahampati Katanjali Andiwarang Ayacata Santi Dasata Paraja Kajatika Te setu dhammang anukampimang pajang.
Good morning, friends, or afternoon, or evening, wherever you are. So I've got some feedback from yesterday towards the end with questions. I started last weekend I should say, started answering questions. People had questions about how monks and lay people should interact and things like that. And a couple of weeks ago, one of the members asked me to give a talk on monastic vinaya and for lay people. And so I've thought about actually combining all of this into one talk, because it doesn't necessarily need to be 3 separate talks, right? We can put it all together. And what it comes down to actually is what the Buddha called the Fourfold Assembly. And so the topic of this talk is the Fourfold Assembly, monastics and lay people working together in the Dhamma, right? Because the Fourfold Assembly is an extremely integral and important part of the Buddha's teaching and keeping that teaching alive. Right? And I'm going to actually, in a minute, I'm going to read you directly from the sutta, because you have to, sometimes summarizing it is not enough. You have to hear directly the words from the suttas to really have it be impactful. But the Buddha was very, very clear that the way that this Dhamma survives, the way that this, what he brought into the world, what he calls the, modern day we call it Buddhism, but that's a modern invention, that term, right? If you read in the suttas, what the Buddha called his, whatever you would call it, religion, philosophy, way of life, etc., what he called his teachings was the Dhamma and Vinaya. So the teaching and the discipline. So you will say, in this Dhamma and Vinaya, right? So this is the Buddha's sasana, the Buddha's Dhamma and Vinaya, right? And the way that this Dhamma and Vinaya exists and continues to exist is through what the Buddha called the Fourfold Assembly. The Fourfold Assembly, come on in, girls. The Fourfold Assembly is what? Men and women monastics, men and women lay people. So, all kinds of human beings. Monastics and lay people. Men and women. And that's the Fourfold Assembly. And when the Buddha became awakened, Mara came to him. And Mara knew the danger of a fully awakened Buddha in the world, that he would teach the Dhamma, and many people would be, would free themselves from Mara's clutches. So when Buddha became awakened, Mara said, "Oh, wonderful, good job, Buddha, very good. You've become awakened. Now pass on, go away, leave this world." And the Buddha says, "No, I will not leave this world until I have a fourfold assembly that is skilled, learned, knowledgeable, practice well. Right? I will not leave this world until such time." And so 40 years later, in the Mahaparinibbana Sutta, which is where I'm going to read from here. Where is it? Which one is it? Okay. So again, 40 years later, Mara has been dejected for many years because so many of the Buddha's disciples have seen Mara and dismissed him. And now it is coming time for the Buddha to pass on. And so Mara comes to the Buddha again. And Mara says, "And now, Lord, the Blessed Lord has such monks and disciples. May the Blessed One now attain final nibbana. May the welfare now attain final nibbana. So basically Lamar is saying, now go away. Go away. And so this is the direct wording here. Let me see. Okay, so because, and he says, now it's time for you to go away. But then because you told me this 40 years ago, you said this. Evil one, I will not take final nibbana until I have monks. And so this, it starts out with monks, then it goes to, so bhikkhus, bhikkhunis, laymen, laywomen. So the one paragraph applies to all four groups. Till I have bhikkhus, bhikkhunis, laymen, and laywomen who are accomplished, trained, skilled, learned, knowers of the Dhamma, trained in conformity with the Dhamma, connected, correctly trained in walking in the path of the Dhamma, who will pass on what they have gained from their teacher, teach it, declare it, establish it, expound it, and analyze it, make it clear, till they shall be able by means of the Dhamma to refute false teachings that have arisen and teach the Dhamma of wondrous effect. Think about, this is important, right? This is, and traditionally, it has kind of come down that the monks are supposed to be the scholars and the studious, and they're supposed to study this, and then the lay people just do merit and generosity. But the Buddha is actually saying, this is the Buddha saying that the Fourfold Assembly needs both monks and lay people who are disciplined, accomplished, trained, skilled, knowers of the Dhamma. Trained in the Dhamma. Right? So this is very important. Right? This is a very important thing that we, as Buddhist people, right, as people who want to see that the Buddha Gautama's teaching continues to last for a long time, right? There are some people who say already, we're in the Dhamma ending age, the Buddha's dispensation will be forgotten soon, all these things. The Dhamma is so corrupted right now that nobody can become awakened, right? And I don't know if I believe in that. My preceptor, Bhante Gunaratana, he didn't believe in that either. Many accomplished, like Ajahn Chah from the Thai tradition, Ajahn Chah and Ajahn Mun, they didn't believe in these things either, right? They practiced. They said, we're going to practice as the Buddha taught us, right? And so, even if we are, of course, we're 2,500 years away and from when the Buddha arose, for the average person, that seems like a lot of time, 2,600 years. Wow, that's a lot. But then you go through things like, did you know that Cleopatra, the last queen of Egypt, is actually closer to us in time than when the pyramids were built? And you say, whoa, right? Because we think that long ago was so long ago. But actually, in terms of the Dhamma, it's not. Right? It's only a blink of an eye that the Buddha was here in this world with us, proclaiming the Dhamma, right? And since that time, 2,600 years ago, men and women, monastics and lay people have kept this Dhamma alive, have kept this Buddha Sasana alive, right? So that today here, from our Buddhist countries, and now also in the West, somebody like me even, right, who was born in the West, can hear the Dhamma, can listen to the Dhamma, can go forth in the Dhamma. Right? This is a wonderful thing that our ancestors have done. Right? When I think of, I'm not Indian, I'm not Asian, but when I think about my ancestors, I think about also my monastic ancestors, right? So my bhikkhus and bhikkhunis are my ancestors who go back to the time of the Buddha, right? And how they kept this Dhamma alive. And how men and women lay people from so many countries, from so many places in the world, have kept this Dhamma alive and grown it. Right? So it's very, very important that those of us who would like to see this Dhamma to grow into the future will do what? right? Not just post a link on social media, become a Buddhist, right? You know, but to practice the Dhamma, to learn the Dhamma, to understand the Dhamma, right? See, this is the thing. If you read the ancient texts, you will see, like there's Mahavachagota Sutta, which is Vachagota is a Brahmin who comes to the Buddha, and he asks them, he says, are there lay people who have attained such and such awakenings, right? Like Sotipanna, Srimantari, once returner, non-returner, etc. And the Buddha says, yes. There are not only 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, but more lay women who have attained Srimantri, lay men who have attained Srimantri, monastics who have attained Srimantri, lay men, lay women, monastics who have attained non-returner, right? And Vachagota says, wow, right? And that, like that amazement, that just that there are so many well-skilled, well-developed people in this Dhamma discipline was enough to convince this Brahmin to say, consider me a layperson under the Buddha for life, right? So that, in and of itself, is a very encouraging thing, right? You know, in the West, one of the things that's, you know, somebody might read that, oh, the Fourfold Assembly is very good, but then they look around and they say, well, where are all the women monastics? Where are the bhikkhunis, right? And so they feel disheartened. They say, well, you know, the Buddha says about all these Fourfold Assembly, but where are they, right? Or, you know, the lay people, oh, but the lay people, they're not really, you know, how come they're not practicing like the Buddha says we should all practice, right? And so that kind of is disheartening. It's a little discouraging. It's like, you know, but this is why it's so important for all of us to understand this is how we should practice, right? This is how the Buddha encourages us. The Buddha says, practice this way. Right? Even in the suttas, you can you think that, oh, it's just supposed to be the monks are up here and the lay people here and the monks teach the Dhamma. No. Do you know about householder Chitta? Householder Chitta, you can see this in the early text. You can see householder Chitta was a layman who taught monks. He taught lay people, he taught everybody, but some monks even went to him to hear and to understand the Dhamma. Right, so this is very important. This is very, in my opinion, encouraging and enlightening to understand that the lay people have a stake in this too. Right? To understand the Dhamma, to learn the Dhamma, right? To know the Dhamma. And I know it's a hard time. One of the things that have stopped that from happening in many Buddhist countries is that there hasn't been lots of good translations of like the suttas in people's countries. Even in Sri Lanka, I remember a young guy came to me, a Sri Lankan gentleman, when I was at Bhavana, and he said, Bhante, he says, I wasn't able to read the suttas until I read them in English. And I realized how grateful I was, right, that I was able to understand these suttas, even though a person who was born in a Buddhist country wasn't able to, because of the way it was set up that they wouldn't allow the Dhamma to be translated into the normal speak. Right? I felt like sad about that. I was like, oh, okay, so this person, but now he's here and he's able to learn and he's able to understand and he took charge of his practice, right? That's the most important thing. That you see these Fourfold Assembly, these laymen and laywomen and men and women monastics, they were like equal partners of a whole, right? The Fourfold Assembly. This Fourfold Assembly is what keeps the Dhamma alive. It's what allows us to keep it alive and to spread it so that people who one of the phrases in the suttas is without having heard the Dhamma they would be lost, right? So there's lots of people who are who have little dust in their eye, right? Who would be very impacted and very would love the Dhamma, but they have no contact with it. Right? Like I was one of those, right? But I was able to, thanks to people who came from Buddhist countries and who started places here and stuff like that, I was able to make contact with that later in my life. Right? That was so wonderful. And so for me, this is one of my most important things. You know, I have my own awakening, which is the most important thing, because you can't help others if you can help yourself. But then on the other hand, I have the other side of my Dhammadutta. Right? Dhammadutta means like a Dhamma mission. Right? My Dhamma mission is to help grow the Dhamma in this country that I was born in. Right? So it's very good, very important that we make sure that both monastics and lay people are well trained, right? Well versed in the Dhamma. Understand this Dhamma. Right? And to do that, we have to be able to work together. Right? And we also have to be able to understand things from each other's perspectives. There are duties that a layperson has to a monastic, and that a monastic has to a layperson. Right? Our main shared duty together is that we keep the system, we keep the Buddhasasana going. Right? That's a shared duty. What's another shared duty? Another shared duty is that we do our best to make sure that those who are teaching in the system and those who are, what would you have authority in the system are wise and skillful and understand this Dhamma well, right? Who won't abuse it and who will not be a bad, like a bad image. Like, you see in the last couple of years, there's many, Buddhist teachers who have come out who have been accused of various things and stuff like that happens, right? So it's all of our, together, both monastics and lay people, to make sure that we make sure that those of us who are in the Dhamma and practicing the Dhamma are doing it skillfully, right? And we work together to do that. The other thing that should be understood is, and this is an interesting thing for me, because I believe that actually lay people should understand the Vinaya. Now, obviously, you can't understand the extent of the monastic Vinaya like monastics. And to be honest with you, in my experience, most monastics don't really fully understand the Vinaya either, right? And I'm not coming at that as like, oh, I know the Vinaya, like kind of arrogance. Actually, as a Westerner, it was something that I was surprised about. Right? I mean, I knew a little bit about that reading like Ajahn Chah, and you see Ajahn Chah's stories of him going to places and monks don't really know the Vinaya and things like that. So I kind of knew that existed, but then once I became a monk and I realized, whoa, right? And so really understanding the Vinaya is actually something that's very important for monastics. Because why? Because as a monastic, we have to live with these rules. That's my understanding. This is why I'm such a, I'm not going to call myself a scholar of the Vinaya, but it is something that I really enjoy to read. I've read through it many times, and I continue to do, to really understand my knowledge. Because why? Because this informs how I can understand how I can live with these rules in society. Right? Because it's not easy, especially in a society that is not, like if I was in Sri Lanka, Burma, Thailand, in Indonesia, a place where around in a Buddhist community, actually, that support actually makes it much easier for a monastic to follow the rules. Right? In the West, it gets a lot tougher because oftentimes the support's not there, right? And so being able to understand the monastic rules is very important. And what some monastics will tell me, that the reason why they don't think that's good is because lay people will not fully understand the full context of the rules, and they'll be they'll cast a lot of blame on the monks and be very nitpicky on the monks, and always be looking, oh, they're doing this wrong, they're doing this wrong, right? And that is a valid, I agree, that's a valid understanding. But I think last week, if you were here last week, you heard me talking about how we have to understand that monks are people, right? That monks are not awakened beings, right? So that it helps you to develop compassion and empathy, and that not to have a fault-finding mind, right? When the Buddha, in the video, when the Buddha talks about if you are to go and admonish another monastic, there's a couple things you need to do. Like you have to do it with a mind of metta, not with a fault-finding mind, not like you're trying to pick at everybody's faults and things like that, right? So I encourage you to, and it's available in English. Like I found years before I was a monastic, I found the monastic rules on PDF online. I said, oh wow, this is cool. I actually get to read the monastic rules. Like, this is maybe going back 10 years ago. Right about the time that I was starting to think about becoming a monastic. And I started to understand, like, oh, okay. And that now, as I've gone through, I understand now that there is what is in the Vinaya, and there is also what is part of culture, right? And there's also how the Vinaya is interpreted. All right, one of the most important things to understand, I think, with lay people and monastics is when that monastic is dealing with people of the opposite sex, right? So this deals with monastics, bhikkhus and women, and bhikkhunis and men, right? So I don't know how many of us men, I don't think I actually had an interaction with a bhikkhuni as a layman. I didn't know where they were. I had no idea. I had no contact with them, so I never had that experience as a layman. But in the bhikkhunis rules, because actually the Buddha says that a skilled bhikkhu should understand both the bhikkhuni and the bhikkhu rules, right? So I should understand the rules for the women monastics as well. And so one of the most common ones is the rule about monks not being allowed to touch women. Okay? So if you look in the Vinaya, the rule is, so in the monastic rules, there is the rule itself, and then there's a story that explains why the rules came about. Because in the early days of when the Buddha first started his teaching, most of the monastics had either already become awakened or were very close. So they were naturally not doing all kinds of crazy bad stuff. But as the Dhamma became more popular and more people wanted to become monastics, well then, what would happen was, and the Buddha is so wise in this, the Buddha didn't just make up a list of rules. He made rules as he went along when people messed up. Right? So when a monk did something, and the society, the people didn't like it, and the monastics didn't like it, and the Buddhist lay people didn't like it, and they brought this to the Buddha, and the Buddha says, oh, this is not good. You foolish man, that's what the Buddha says. Or where the bhikkhuni says, you foolish woman, you should not have done this. This is not for what? This is not for the increase in confidence and faith of those who already have confidence and faith, so for people who are Buddhist, right? And neither it is for the development of confidence and faith for people who are not Buddhist, right? So the people who are not Buddhist, but who might be kind of interested, and they kind of start looking in, and they see this, and they're like, oh, I don't like this. Like, I'm not going to go forward because I see this, right? So the Buddha, for the development and for the continued existence of the teachings, the Buddha considered the culture at the time, right? Just like we have to consider the culture in Thailand or Sri Lanka or Burma or Indonesia or even in America, right? As Buddhism starts to come to America. And so the way the story goes is, right, that a married couple comes to a monastic. Apparently back in the day, the people, one of the favorite layperson things with monastics was to go and tour their little hut, or their cave. I was like, ooh, let me see how this monastic lives, right? So this married couple comes in there, and the husband it's kind of like he's kind of dim-witted, he's kind of a little doofus, and he's like, wow, this is so wonderful. And meanwhile, behind him, the monk is like, putting his hands on the wife and rubbing her shoulder and things like that. And then when they leave, the husband's like, wow, these monks are so good. Right? And the wife says, well, that monk, touched me like a husband would touch me. And the husband got angry. And he said, these monks are horrible. They're liars. They do shenanigans, etc. Right? And so then that came to the Buddha. And so this is where the rule came. The rule is that a monk whose mind is filled with lust should not touch a woman. Right? That's it. That's the rule. So we understand where this came from. So first of all, we understand that this rule is not made because women are bad, or women are evil, or women are dirty, or women are impure, or anything like that. It was made to protect women from a bad monk, right? And we see a bunch of these rules that in the West, people would see this like, oh, that's misogynist. That's a rule against women. But actually, if you read the story, it's because monks are doing bad things, right? So the Buddha makes this rule. And so this rule has morphed into, right, that there should be no physical contact whatsoever between a bhikkhu and a woman layperson. Right? And there's a couple of reasons for that. One of the reasons is that later developments, there came what's to be called the mind woman, right? It's the Abhidhamma and things like that. And you never see this mind moment thing in the early texts or the Vinaya. But later on, there's a mind moment. So like you divide 1 second into like 72 mind moments, right? And so you might be, a bhikkhuni might be dealing with a man, or a bhikkhu might be dealing with a woman, and they might not even recognize it, but 1/72 of a second, some lust arose, right? And so then they will argue that is a breach of the rule, right? And so that is how, as far as I understand, I'm not a scholar. This is what in my own research of understanding and learning from senior monastics, as to why this has kind of come down this way, right? This is what I understand to be this development of this mind moment. And you know what? Is the kind of the modern version of, you shouldn't touch women at all, is that prudent? Possibly, yeah. Because this is why, there could be many different senior monastics who might hear me speaking, and they will say, this monk is wrong, right? And then some will say, oh yeah, this monk is right? Because there's lots of different views, lots of different understandings, right? And so, as a layperson, and this is something that, when I talk to Westerners, it's important, because they'll talk to me, and they know that this is how I, roll things. But I tell them, I said, listen, if you go to a more traditional place, this is what they're going to expect. This is how you should. So, you don't just go in there like a Westerner saying, this is how it should be. No, you understand that different cultures, different people are going to interpret things differently, right? So you should understand that, right? And so, and it's the same thing with Westerners. My preceptor, Bhante Gunaratana, when he came to America, he thought, he said, well, some things, this is a different culture, some things need to change, some things need to be updated, right? And so he started doing things if people would shake his hand, he would shake their hand, right? Now, for a person from, a Buddhist country, or from, the handshaking thing, as far as I can tell, this is a Westerner, an ignorant Westerner, I'm not from that culture, so I don't understand. But as far as I can tell, and this is what I tell Westerners, is even regular people, like from places, mostly it's the handshaking thing is a Western thing. It wasn't something that, you know, that you get this close and you hold hands and things like that, right? So it's not like a thing where like, oh, you know, you can't touch me per se, but it's just part of the culture. It's a different way of people interacting. And so, you know, so like Sri Lankan people, they weren't too keen on these kind of things, right? So like they have, and there's a couple different senior Sri Lankan monastics that I know of who came to America and who have actually done a lot of good, helping a lot of, you know, bringing the Dhamma to the West. They tell stories about how the people from their culture, from their country, would say, this is not how a monk should act. This is not how you should do it. This is not how you should do it, right? And Bhante Ji told me a story when I was talking to him one day about this, you know, monastics and women having physical contact and things like that. And he told me a story of a very senior monastic in Sri Lanka. And you know who came to visit? The Queen of England came to visit Sri Lanka, right? And there was all these dignitaries, right? You know, laymen and women who are dignitaries, government people, etc. And you know, in countries like Sri Lanka and Thailand, monks have kind of like some high political office and they're kind of interconnected in the government that way. And so here's this very senior monastic in line as the Queen of England is going down. And Bhante Ji said, you can watch the video. This was like 30 years ago, something like that. And the monk is going like this, like, should I, you know, shake the hand of the queen or not, right? And so in the end, the monastic actually shook the queen's hand, and then Bhante Ji told me it was a scandal for a month in the newspapers that this monk shook the queen's hand and all these kinds of things, right? So this is how it is. This is how we understand, you know, and this is how, for me as a monastic, wherever I go, if I go to Thai place, Burmese place, Sri Lankan place, Indonesian place, etc., what I want to do is to try to do things in the way that the people there are most understanding and comfortable with, right? I don't want to come in and say, this is how I do things, and you know, yada yada yada. That's not really beneficial to the Dhamma, right? That's not really a very beneficial thing, right? But so, you know, I'll give you, you know, from my policies, like me knowing the Vinaya. So one of my policies is, if somebody wants to shake my hand, I'll do it, man or a woman. Now, I'm not going to go out and try to shake somebody's hand, right? Because as a monk, I shouldn't, you know, stay dignified or whatever. But if somebody comes and shakes my hand, it's okay, I'll do it, right? And you know, that's not something necessarily, you know, because what I saw, you know, being in a place with lots of Westerners who came, like, you know, if a Westerner goes to just shake somebody's hand or whatever, and the monk's kind of like this, actually it's kind of hurtful to the person. Like, it feels like, you know, like, oh, you know, because they don't know, they don't understand, right? But they know in their culture that the person's kind of being like this, they're like, oh, what is this person? They don't want to, you know, say hello to me, they don't want to, etc., right? So, you know, I had to read, I had to understand the Vinaya to understand it's okay that I can do this, right? I'm not being lustful and trying to, you know, make contact because of that, right? I'm not making contact at all, right? The other person's coming to me, whatever, I'll accept it, okay, right? Another policy of mine that's much more controversial, you know, and again, I'm only talking for myself, right? Many monks and many other people would say this is not good at all, and I can understand their view. But for me, one of the things that I do is, like, I've had people who, just out of kind of like a gratitude feeling, emotion, just an overwhelming positive feeling, right? And I've had people just hug me, and I'm kind of like, okay, you know, like, what am I supposed to do? I'm a monk, right? And so, again, from the same reason, I says, there's no actually, if somebody actually wants to hug me, there's no breach of a rule, right? I'm not going out and hugging somebody else, but if they want to hug, if they feel that way, it's okay. I'm not going to be like, oh, get away from me, right? Again, it's not a good thing in that regard. Now, I know that Buddhist people and Westerners who are very trained Buddhist people, they're not even going to do that at all, right? They're not going to come and hug me, right? But but even still, it's technically not against the rules, right? And you actually see this like in the Tibetan tradition. They're big huggers, like the Dalai Lama. Everybody's hugging. The Dalai Lama's hugging. There's pictures of Dalai Lama hugging a famous bhikshuni and things like that. And some people don't like it, but this is how it is. So it is important for a layperson to understand these rules and understand how they're interpreted. Right? And so that could be whole classes in schools and things like that. So it's like, that's exhausting. So the most important thing is to understand, is to be whatever monastic you're with, like if you're taking care of them or whatever, you understand, like, okay, this is how monastics usually follow this rule, but I know this, how do you follow this rule? What do you do here? What do you do there? Etc. Right? So another one is monks not being able to be alone with a woman, right? This is another important one. Like when I came here, I was asked, how do I feel about just when people come to bring me my food, how do I feel about just one woman coming? And I said, well, if I don't get food for the day, I'm okay. I've survived. I've done multiple day fasts. I'm good. I don't need. But B, if that's the only thing that can happen, it's okay. Is it preferable? No, because it does technically break the rule. So there's two important factors to understand about being alone. And this is the same thing with men. If you have contact with a bhikkhuni, it's the same thing, right? There's two important factors, right? It is being invisible or blocked by the eye and blocked by the ear. So if you're in a place, so for instance, like I'm here, right? I'm here by myself. I'm the only monastic here in this house right now. The only person who's resident here. And if one woman comes in and now I'm alone in a house with one woman, that's a breach, because it's in a place that is hidden from other people by the eye. Nobody can, you could technically, if you're in a window, maybe you could, see inside, but most people aren't. And it's by the ear. Somebody might be able to see, but they won't be able to hear. Right? So those are two important things. And so this is why a monastic, so for instance, like at Bhavana Society, which is a retreat center, a place that many Westerners come, people, all different kinds of people come to go on retreat. And we have an interview with a monastic. So if you want to come once during the retreat, or if you have questions, you can come with the monastic. And Bhante Ji has the library at Bhavana set up well. That's actually perfect for this thing, right? Because the door to the library is glass, so you can see in very clearly, and also there's like a vent on top that you can hear what's coming in the library, right? So you can be in this room with a woman with the door closed, but not breaking the rule, because it's very clearly you can see in and very clearly you can hear, right? So these are the important factors. So like another one of my rules is people will ask, is it okay if a woman comes to pick you up, like in a car? And I say, while it's technically okay, it would be preferable if not. But if there's no way else, then it's okay. Like one of the things that I do, like, my family, I have two younger sisters as my siblings, and my family who lives in New Jersey, like if I come to New Jersey, sometimes my sister will pick me up. And I thought about that, like, is that okay? Is that okay? One of the interesting things I found out recently actually was that senior Thai forest monastics even said to their juniors, If it's a family member, it's okay. I was surprised because I thought they would be much more strict about these things. But, technically, you're in a car has windows, right? As long as they're not tinted, somebody can see in. And if it's the summer and the window's down, somebody could hear too. So it's technically okay. It's not really. There's also a third factor. I forgot. A third factor is that the people are seeking to be hidden. Like you're trying to be alone with the other person. That's a third factor, right? So it's very complicated. But this is why it's important to understand that actually there are different ways to interpret different things. Like for instance, in the Thai tradition, they have what's called the Vinaya Mukha, which is a commentary of the Vinaya, right? And so many Buddhist monastics in Thailand, that is their Vinaya. That is what they go by, right? In Sri Lanka, there's no such thing, right? In the Vinaya, there's no such thing because it's just the Vinaya, right? So different monastics will interpret and do things differently, and so we should understand that as well. So like, if you, those of you who are in the West, right, you might say, oh, these Western Buddhist monastics, they're not following Vinaya, they're not doing this, they're not doing that. It might be the case, but it also might be, well, this is what the Vinaya says, and this other thing is kind of something that was added later, right? Like for instance, in Thailand, they have for a woman to offer something to a monk, they have to do it with a cloth, right? No such thing in the Vinaya. And if you go to Sri Lanka, also no such thing, right? In Sri Lanka, there's no such thing as this cloth. But in Thailand, that's how it is. So if I was a person, I went to Thailand, and this is how it is, I'm not going to say to a laywoman, you don't need a cloth, that's stupid. No, if that's how, this is respecting the different cultures, respecting the different ways that people do this. And so this is important for us to understand, right? And the more we understand this, the more we can work together, right? There's less critical, judgmental, one of the things that is unfortunate, like I think the duties that monastics have to lay people is to encourage them more, right? To be a bit more involved in having them do their own practice, right? Do their own learning. Keep doing this. This is very good. It's very good, right? Monks should, there's a wonderful thing in the Vinaya where when it comes to a senior monastic and a junior monastic, right? And it says that the junior monastic should look at the senior monastic as a father or a mother in case of bhikkhunis, and the senior monastic should look at the junior monastic as a son or a daughter, right? And that's a wonderful thing. So for me, I think that monastics and lay people should look at each other as like siblings, right? We want to encourage each other to do good in the Dhamma. We want to encourage each other. We don't want to look down on each other, right? We want to, because if you read, in my opinion, if you read the early texts in the Vinaya, actually what we see today is like the monks are like high up on this pedestal and the lay people are there. Actually, it was more like this. Like in the Vinaya, the monastics are field of merit, right? So it's not totally like this. It's not totally equal, but it's closer, right? It's much a closer thing because you have this interaction. You have Chitta the householder teaching monastics and monastics going into town every day and talking with lay people, right? You have this interaction, and it's important, I think, for monastics to encourage that. Now, we can't get involved in a lot of things. We're not, coming into the town and getting involved in the gossip and who's doing this and who's doing that. None of that. But we should be able to be more engaged with the lay people to encourage them to practice, right? To encourage them to develop their Noble Eightfold Path. And I think this is a very important thing, right? We should also, in my opinion, we should be very grateful, right? It's very easy for a monastic, especially, I've not experienced what I've experienced here ever. the wonderful people coming, bringing me food every day, but they're not, not much responsibility. Now, I'm like, this is kind of nice. I like this. I've never experienced this before because I was always lots of work, lots of activity, lots of this, right? And it's very easy for monastics to kind of be like, oh yes, I deserve this. Thank you. You've given me the best food. Yes, I deserve that food, and I like that food, and I want that. Right? It's very easy for a monastic to kind of lose their gratitude, right, and lose their understanding. Like these lay people, they're doing, this is hard times, but even still, they're coming in here. They're still doing this. They're still doing that. So it's very important for monastics to be more down to earth. Right, to understand, to have much more gratitude for the lay people, right, and what they do, right, because especially, again, as a Westerner, being around mostly Westerners in a place that is a kind of, like where I, became a monk, was a mix. There was lots of Westerners and lots of Sri Lankan and Thai and etc. So I got to see a little bit of it, but still, always lots of work, lots of activity, lots of fixing things and doing this and teaching that, and yada yada, all this stuff. And so it's very easy to forget the gratitude, right? To kind of take lay people for granted, right? And lay people are here. Oh, good. I need you to do this. I need you to do that. I need you to do that. Like you always think of lay people as like servants, right? So this is also something that monastics should not do either, right? Monastics should really, really reflect on the gratitude that should arise for what the lay people do. So I think I've talked enough. We have about 20 minutes left, so if there's any questions. So if you have any clarifications on monastic rules, anything, any questions for me regarding the Fourfold Assembly, us working together, or anything like that, feel free to ask a question.
Thank you, Bante. All right, friends, whoever want to ask direct questions to Bante through Zoom, you're welcome to raise your hand. There's a feature on the bottom right of your phone. There are 3 dots that you can press on, and then there's a raise hand feature that you can click if you want to ask. Or if you're using laptop or computer, under the participant folder, there's a raise hand feature as well that you can use to ask questions directly. All right. Looks like Cisarita has questions. Please go ahead. Unmute, please.
Okay, my name is Bante. I don't have question actually, Bante. I just would like to thank you. Remember 2 weeks before, I asked you about whether it's okay to chant while driving. This is what happened just a week ago. I just proceeded to the freeway, not even 10 minutes. I was in the right lane and then the car on the left lane. I just surpassed the car about a second when the car hit the truck in front of him and then spun 360 degrees, went to the right lane. Oh my God, if I didn't surpass that car, that car might hit me. So immediately I think about you and remember that you said it's okay to chant along while driving. That's what I was doing. That is why I'm so happy that you told me it's not wrong to do that.
Sure, very good.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, thank you, Cisarita, for the sharing. Let's see if there's any more questions.
Oh, I have one question actually
Go
about
ahead.
Dhamma-Jutta.
Yep, go ahead.
Bante, you mentioned about Dhamma-Jutta. Who could be a Dhamma-Jutta? Is this for assembly or anybody? Thank you.
Oh, everybody. Anybody who's a Buddhist person, Dhammadutta is just a Dhamma mission. It's like, now, it's important to understand that in Buddhist tradition, we don't do like the Christians and Muslims and other lots of different religions where they're, we go out and we try to get people to convert, right? We're much more like the Jewish people, right? The Jewish people actually like, they actually make it hard for you to become Jewish. But we're not trying to convert people. What we're trying to do is, the best way to think about it is that the Buddha, when the first 60 arahants came, right, together, and they were all together, and the Buddha says, now, go forth for the good of the many folk, right? Go forth, not one in the same direction, right? And one person might think, oh, that means that we should go be missionaries, right? But it's very important because what the Buddha is not saying, go do this, do that. Actually, there's a rule. One of the monastic rules is, this is important to understand, and this is why the tradition happens where, Sonny did the chanting to invite me to teach, because one of our rules is I can't just go up to somebody and start talking to them about Buddha or the Dhamma, right? It is against the rules for me to give a Dhamma talk to somebody who didn't ask for it first. Right, so we're not trying to. This is what I joke about to people. I say we're not going knocking on people's doors and say, "Hello, have you heard about our Lord and Savior Buddha?" Right? We can't do that. Right? So it's very important for us to understand what we mean by Dhamma mission. Right? This means that when these monks, these original 60 arahants, went around, right? They weren't like, "Come hear about the Dhamma." No, they were so wise and so composed, and they wandered, and people were like, who are these people? This is amazing, right? And of course, don't forget, the tradition at the time in India was that Buddhist monks were not the only ones wandering for alms. It was lots of different, so it was part of the culture at the time, right? So that they basically came out, and so people were so impressed, and they talked to them, and then they asked for, and then that's how it grew, right? So how we as Buddhists want to spread the Dhamma, like for instance, I'll give an example of myself, right? When Bhante Gunaratana, my preceptor, the one person who ordained me, he came to America, he traveled all over the world. He's been to every continent except for Antarctica to share the Dhamma, right? He traveled so many places to share the Dhamma, to make it open for people. He was one of the people who was really important to have Theravada be available for Westerners in America, in my country, right? So he didn't go around trying to force people or trying to tell people, but what he did was he helped start an organization. He wrote books. He traveled around. He talked to people, etc. Right? And so for me, I consider myself, I'm the next generation, right? I have the baton now, it's my turn, right? And so what I'd like to do to help my Dhamma mission is to actually start my own place eventually in years to come, and then train lots of good monks. And my view, my method is more like the Ajahn Chah method. I like Ajahn Chah's method, how he trained people. And then the monks, and then he kicked them out. He says, don't be attached to me. Go start a place in your own country, right? And so I would like to have lots of different good monks in different states, right? So for me, that is spreading the Dhamma, right? That's not trying to force people to understand. That is, guess what? There are so many places in this country, in my country, that to even find even a basic monastery, you'd have to drive 3 or 4 states. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 hours, right, to find a place, right? So there needs to be more places, right? There needs to be more availability. So for me, that's what I mean, to have, to spread awareness, to practice well. The other thing for a layperson and for monastic is you lead by example, right? You practice well, you live skillfully, and people will say, "Ooh, what is this person? What is their belief? What is their? How do they practice?" Right? It's how I was when I was a lay person at work, and I would be meditating or whatever, and people would be like, "Oh, this person meditates," and we're all anxious and running around, and we have to drink lots of coffee and smoke and all these kind of things. But this person's meditating, and he's always pretty calm. What's his secret? Right? So people came and asked me, what did you do? And then I talked to them about meditation and things like this, right? So it's about having the availability, and it's about being an example. It's not about trying to force people to know about Buddhism. Right? So that's very important. Right? There's a very funny little skit on YouTube, a YouTube video where it's this guy comes back from a Vipassana retreat, and everybody, his family, his friends, his co-workers, he's talking about, oh, the Vipassana is so great, you should go. And like you see all the people like, oh. Right? So I tell people, I say, don't be that guy. It's actually very common. Like I went through this phase, and lots of other people who are Buddhist converts go through this phase of, this is the most amazing thing, I can't believe I didn't find out about it, I need everybody to know. Right? And I have to say, okay, calm down. Don't be that guy. Right? Lead by example. Be the change you want to see in the world, right? That wonderful quote that's attributed to Gandhi, but that's not really what he said. But still, it's a wonderful quote, right? You have to be the change you want to see. And so that's how you have a Dhammadutta, right? Starting organizations, building up availability for people to learn the Dhamma, right? To come in contact with the Dhamma, and to live it yourself. That's the best way.
Thank you. Thank you, Bante. So how do you, does your family accept, or your friend grow up, kids, that your friends from childhood, accept you as a Buddhist monk right now?
Well, so at first, my family and friends, when I started talking to them about becoming a Buddhist monk, well, they knew I was a Buddhist, right? That I became a Buddhist. And, I come from a family of people who, for the most part, are kind of live and let live. So they, I stopped being, a Catholic a long time ago. It just wasn't my thing. I have nothing against it. Even to this day, like, I have nothing, I hang out with Catholic monks and do the interfaith things and stuff like that. Catholic monks are really funny. I like them. But anyway, it just wasn't my thing. And then when I became a Buddhist, I kind of became separate from my family is this and I'm that. But I still went to church with my mom and things like that. Because I was like, I'm a Buddhist. It's not, but it's a good. Buddha says to respect your parents and to take care of them and things like that. So that's what I'm gonna do. Respect my parents and things like that. So they kind of knew I was a Buddhist, but I also didn't talk to them about it. I didn't I try to convert them. I wasn't like, the Buddhist way is the best way, and you know, all this kind of stuff. Right? I wasn't like that. I never have been. And so I never created any conflict, right? I never created any reason for them to dislike it. And so it kind of just was like, wasn't an issue. Where I think they grew a bit more concerned was when I decided I wanted to become a monastic. And then, you know, first of all, I'm the eldest son, the only son in the family, you know, and, you know, now they like, I'm gonna leave the family and all this stuff, and it was, you know, it was kind of a very close Italian family, very close. I didn't leave the county I was born in until I became a monk. So I was in the same county as my family, right? The same region as my family my whole life. Even when I was married, when I was young and I was married, I was only 3 towns away. Right? So even then, I was still close. And so it was a very hard thing for them that I left. You know, and it took them a couple of years. You know, I told you about my one best friend from lay life, Rafe, the other day, about when I was talking about Kalyanamitas last week. And so he was supportive of it, you know, and so friends-wise, I had, you know, support. Family-wise, they supported in me. They supported me doing what I felt like I needed to do, but they were still very sad about it. And when I left to the monastery, they were still kind of hoping that I'd come back soon. That I'd decide, like, you know, even after the first year, still the second year, they were like, he might be back. He might be back. Now, at like close to 6 years, they're like, nah, he's not coming back. Yeah, this is not, because I tell him, I said, even if I become a layperson again, I'm not living in New Jersey again. I'm going to go to Virginia or someplace in the country because that's what I like. You know, so they've had a lot of good experiences with Buddhist people, actually, that has kind of allowed them to understand what I'm doing and to kind of come to terms with it. And they see that I'm happy and that I'm helping people and I'm doing good and all that kind of stuff. And even though they would love, my mom obviously would love that I was Christian and married and had kids and all that kind of stuff. Of course, she would love that would happen. But that's not how it happened. And my sisters have children now too, so she's distracted. Yeah.
Awesome.
So.
Alright. Thank you, Bante. I think we still have about 7 minutes.
Carl.
It looks like Carl has the questions. Go ahead, Carl. You can unmute Carl on the yeah.
Okay, it's not a question, it's just a comment. Something that you mentioned struck a real chord with me. Because I was raised a Christian, and I believe Christ too been a great teacher, as was the Buddha. But there's a saying in China that Christ came to China on a cannonball, while Buddha came to China on a white horse. And I think that's almost what you're saying when you talk about not forcing yourself on people,
Yeah.
not forcing Buddhism on people.
Yeah. For sure. I mean, well, I don't know how other people are, but I've always been a very contrarian kind of person. So like if somebody says you have to do this, I'm like, okay, I'm going to do the exact opposite.
I don't mind.
Right? So it doesn't work. It just doesn't. Trying to force something on somebody just doesn't work. Like you said, like you have to do it by, like, you need overwhelming force. You need the cannonball or whatever, or you need some really strong convincing. But yeah, this is why. I mean, has that never happened in Buddhist history? Probably not. I'm sure it's happened somewhere. You know, Westerners tend to really have this kind of idealized version of what Buddhism is in its history. But in general, though, it hasn't. And it shouldn't. And so that's a good thing, that we shouldn't really, as Buddhist people, we shouldn't be trying to force anything on anybody else.
Thank you.
Oke, bagi rekan-rekan yang ingin bertanya dalam bahasa Indonesia juga kami persilakan, atau yang mau di chat box juga silakan, nanti saya yang translate. Yeah, we still have about 4 minutes to go, but if there's no more questions, we can close this. But speaking of your family, I know that you will be with your family sometimes in Christmas. Is it next week or the following week?
Well, if with lockdowns and everything, if everything's okay, if the roads are still open, my sisters are going to pick me up and bring me back for like a day or two, and then I'm going to come back.
Oh, okay. So you're still going to be here.
We'll see what happens. But
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So for now, we still schedule for next week at the same times, and if not, then
Well,
I'll
next week isn't Christmas already, is it? I think it's
not yet.
2 weeks. Yeah.
2 more weeks from now.
Yeah. And I do plan to be back before Sunday, so I should be back.
Oh, okay. All right. So Bande will be here anyway. Okay. Perfect.
If not, I'll tell you.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. So just before we close, just a little announcements that for those who wants to contribute donations to the temple, we have a screen share for the account that we have. I mean, for those in Indonesia, you can transfer your dana through our account in BCA under name Indrawati Citra. The account number is 137-141-2889. And for those who live in North America and has access to Zelle or PayPal, you can transfer your donation through wipadany@gmail.com. And please confirm that the dana is made toward Indonesian Buddhist Family of New York. And next week we're gonna have again the same puja and service, and hopefully Bante will be available and give a talk. And maybe sometimes in midweeks I'll send out the invitations and with a link and the topic. All right. Now we're gonna close with a blessing from Bante Jayasara.
Okay. So I'm going to I'm going to do the English version of this blessing. So this is an ancient Pali blessing, but I haven't. This is actually something I never had to learn, but I really like it, so I'm going to actually start to learn it to do this, the sharing of merits. But for now, we'll just do the English version. So, may the suffering ones be suffering free, and the fear-struck fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief, and may all beings find relief. May all beings share this merit that we've thus acquired, for the acquisition of all kinds of happiness. May beings inhabiting space and earth, devas, nagas, and yakas of mighty power, share this merit of ours. May they long protect the Buddha's dispensation. Sadhu.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you, Bante. And now we're gonna close with Namakarapata. Arahang sama sambuddho bhagawa Buddhang bhagawantang abhiwademi. Sang Bhagawa yang maha suci, yang telah mencapai penerangan sempurna, aku bersujud di hadapan Sang Buddha, Sang Bhagawa. Swakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami. Dhamma telah sempurna dibabarkan oleh Sang Bhagawa. Aku bersujud di hadapan Dhamma. Supatipano Bhagavato Sawaka Sangho Sanghang namami. Sangha siswa Sang Bhagawa telah bertindak sempurna. Aku bersujud di hadapan Sangha. Sabbe sata bhavantu sukhitata. May all beings be happy. Semoga semua makhluk hidup berbahagia. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Alright, before we close, let's give Bante the respect. Okasa Wandami Bante. Thank you, everybody. If you want to say hello to Bante, we still have a couple minutes. Andy's gonna unmute everyone.
Thank you, Bante. I see you next week.
All right, see you next week.
Thank you, Sister Rita. There are also some people from Indonesia.
Have a good day or night.
Yeah. So,
It's getting noisy here at the Vihara, so I can't hear anybody being noisy on any line.
Thank you, Bante. Nice to meet you.
See you.
thank you, Bu Meta.
Can I go
Bu
ahead?
Meta is actually from California, from Los Angeles.
I go ahead.
Just like Rita. Paul is actually in Staten Island.
Okay.
Oh my god.
Thank you, Bante.
Oh, Jew is in Kentucky, Bante.
Oh, Kentucky. Wow, everybody's everywhere.
What?
We
All
accidentally
over the, all
like
over
put
the
our
country.
hand.
Right?
We accidentally like.
Are there any Indonesian temples in Kentucky?
Switch to one of the organizer maybe. In Kentucky.
Yeah.
I think there's a Thai temple, but not Indonesian yet. But there are a few Indonesian families now there. But at least 3 or 4 now. So they can create their own organization maybe in the future.
The Thai people know how to spread their temples. They're everywhere. Even in the places you never expect in America. Like, oh, there's a Thai temple here.
Yeah, that's true.
All kinds of places.
I just want to let you know something. This morning when I started so I listen for your while driving.
Okay, good.
I still pay attention.
Oh, that's fine. I used to have to drive a lot for my work, and I always listen to all kinds of monks teaching Dhamma. That's fine. That's good. You could be listening to other things that are not as good as listening to Dhamma. So very good.
Thank you, Jew. Si Santosa mau.
Bye.
Uncle Andy, do I move?
Okay, thank you guys. See you again next week, yeah. See you guys next week. Bye. Thank you, Bante. It was very good, yeah. I love that topic.
Yeah. I think we need more longer, but
I can talk about it more.
yeah, it's just more detail.
There's,
But in the lay people way, not in the Vinaya way. I mean.
No, it's good to know that there's a story behind it. It's of